The trucker protest has been making headlines around the world, and it's inspiring right-wing activists in Europe, the United States. I'm joined now by Ciaran O'Connor, Analyst with the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, a think tank that tracks online extremism. Good morning. So glad you could be with us.
Hi.
How are these protests in Ottawa emboldening various anti-government, anti-establishment groups around the world?
Yeah, so the protests in Ottawa really have moved beyond what is a domestic issue into something that has been championed by right-wing and far-right white supremacist communities around the world. Really, what we're seeing at the moment is the latest iteration in the COVID protest movement, anti-masks, anti-lockdown, anti-vaccines, and now the kind of anti-mandate protests as well. Really, it seems a pivotal moment was when the protest started to garner attention from right-wing groups and communities within the US. A lot of initial focus around the GoFundMe account, or the GoFundMe campaign, which is no longer active, but also endorsement and support from political figures like President Trump, his two sons as well, current and former GOP figures, but also crucially right-wing content creators or influencers, people like Ben Shapiro or Glenn Beck, people who have enormous reach on social media, which really helped to move it global. And what we're seeing now are inspired protests happening in the UK a couple of days ago, or in continental Europe as well. There's a planned convoy supposedly moving towards Brussels for Monday as well. So across various ways, we're dealing with a protest movement that's been slowly put together over the last 2 years, and this is the latest culmination of the protest movement.
Do you think that this would be happening if the Ottawa protest had been shut down after a day or two?
It's very hard to try and answer that question, because you're dealing with a protest movement who has continuously formed and reformed and refined narratives and points to protest and agitate, I suppose, against as well. And what we're also looking at here is that this is a protest movement that has at its core many believers who are empowered by conspiracies, myths and disinformation. And one thing that's very clear amongst those kinds of communities is that there is no kind of magic bullet or no moment that can easily take people out of such kind of strongly entrenched beliefs. So maybe actions like that could have stopped the physical actions on the ground, but you're also dealing with a highly motivated and highly, I suppose, networked community who really do believe in these movements and in these claims, and are using social media to spread this and entrench more people into it as well.
I think a lot of Canadians have been surprised, shocked by what's happened with the protest in Ottawa. What's your message to people who think this type of thinking may not happen where they live?
Yeah, we've seen right throughout COVID, there's been various protests and demonstrations around different issues like masks and lockdown and vaccines, and lots of people have taken to the streets or gone online to share their grievances or share their frustrations or share their worries. But what we've also seen in train, we've seen that these movements have been co-opted by extremist groups, by people who are seeking to take advantage of people's anger and frustration, and it is a danger. And COVID-19 in so many ways has acted as a catalyst for radicalization. It has allowed extremist groups to frame events and issues in very simplistic terms and narratives, framing it as us versus them, good and evil, the pure people versus the corrupt elite, these kinds of things. But central to so much of the kind of COVID protest movement have been the belief that all restrictions are anti-democratic and all restrictions amount to a permanent power grab by governments. So in these kinds of ways, we can see how extremists have sought to take advantage of the moment. And it definitely is a worry and a risk for wider society of how these extremist movements are using and capitalizing on these moments.
Ciaran O'Connor, he's an analyst with the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. Thank you so much.